Morning, guys. How you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I'm Sean. Bugsy's just up in front. She says hello. Hope you're all happy and healthy. Please do me a favour, guys. Smash the like button for me. Smash the subscribe if you haven't already. We're on the way now to 7K. Drop the notification bell button a little squeeze and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's video, which is, of course, Tottenham Walks, episode 181. And if you were looking at the thumbnail, then you'd know what we're going to talk about in a little bit of detail, and that is all of the transfer news, views and clues regarding our forward line that happen to be hitting the back pages of all the newspapers and all the aggregators and all the rumours websites over the last couple of days. 2 potential outgoings in Harry Kane and Richarlison. 2 potential incomings in Rasmus, Hojlund and Ivan Toney. And we're going to talk about each of those, what that looks like, and whether or not, first and foremost, they're feasible, and second of all, whether or not they would work. Let's start with the outgoings. Harry Kane, we all know, out of contract, end of next season. I don't think he can sign a pre-arrangement contract with a Premier League club until next summer, like in 15 months' time. But I think he can sign a pre-arrangement with a club in Europe or anywhere else from January. I think that's the rule. In any event, we don't yet know how he feels. Continued rumours that the talks about the contract are going to take place at some point between now and the end of the season. And we don't really know whether or not he wants in or out. You wouldn't blame him if he wants out, I guess, with all of the craziness and the volatility that's happening within Tottenham right now. But at the same time, I'm sure most of you could envision a scenario where he stays and tucks himself in for the last 3 or 4 years of his career at Tottenham Hotspur. And look, I don't know which one's more likely or not, but for whatever reason, we still have to discuss the likelihood that he's going. And to be honest, Manchester United today, the only update in the story is that people are starting to put a number towards what Manchester United might come and tempt Tottenham with. And I think the number is obviously very important. In a world where Harry Kane says to Daniel Levy, I want out, I want to go, let me leave. If you don't sell me, I will go for free next year. Then I think Daniel Levy has a very difficult decision to make around how high does the number have to be to justify losing him for the additional year of goals that he would hopefully create and score, and what impact that would have on the other mechanisms of revenue generation at Tottenham Hotspur, such as the Champions League qualification. Next season, top 5 will get into the Champions League because of the new coefficient scoring point system and the extension of the Champions League from 32 teams to, I think, 36, But 5th is not guaranteed with or without Harry Kane, of course. It's a very complicated and difficult competitive league. However, it's more likely with him than without him. And so if you factor in the relevant campaign prize money, the additional money from sponsorships and TV and media, it's a ballpark figure of about 50 million quid that qualifying for the Champions League is worth. Something around there, just to get into it. So if Daniel Levy's of the mindset that Harry Kane is essential to us finishing 5th next season, then any bid below 50 million quid may prove to be not worth the juice. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Any bid above 50 million quid, maybe you get in towards the Goldilocks zone where it's just about right to be tempted. Manchester United are supposed to be putting down about 75 million as an initial teaser. It's something to think about. What can you do with 75 million quid? Well, you can do a lot more with 75 million than you can do with 0, which would be the outcome if they missed out on selling him, kept him for a new season, didn't finish for the top 5 because he was down in tools and taking his foot off the gas. And we ended up outside of Europe with no Harry Kane. It's a very, very gloomy outlook, but it's a plausible one. And so maybe 75 is not enough. Maybe Manchester United might pay 85. I'd be very surprised if anyone would pay over 100 for a guy with 1 year on his contract left, and that's probably what Daniel Levy would hold out for. But you'd hope that in the end, cool heads would emerge and there would be some sort of compromise, and do it early on in the summer so that you have time to rebuild. You could do a lot with 80 million quid, 85 million quid. Would that be enough to get Ivan Toney in? Probably. You replace one homegrown for another, one England international for another. They're obviously not at all alike in terms of their playing styles, but they're both goal scorers and both offer a lot of value to the teams that they play in. And Ivan Toney is one of those names that have been mentioned, and about 70 million quid is the figure that has been touted. So, me personally, if you're in a situation where you lose Harry Kane, there's not too many number 9s out there that are, first of all, available, and second of all, of high quality. There's absolutely zero Harry Kane equivalents who can play the difference of a 9 and a 10, a 9.5 we'll call him. So trying to replace him or trying to get someone to emulate him, I think is silly. At the same time, guys, you have to get on board with the idea that at some point in the not too distant future, Harry Kane will have scored his last goal and kicked his last ball in a Tottenham shirt. Whether it's 3 years or 3 months, it has to happen at some point. And so Tottenham may need to get their move on with kind of identifying and looking into that scenario. A lot of it will depend on who our manager is and whether or not they can convince Harry Kane to stay, or whether or not they would like a clean of house, a sweep, and get rid of lots of the legacy players. We mentioned yesterday that Julian Nagelsmann, is a young manager, and whilst he definitely prioritises that psychological area and those relationships, there were rumours that he had tough relationships with some of the older players in the Bayern Munich dressing room. And so maybe if you're going to go with a young manager like Nagelsmann, maybe it's better off to have, very few older characters in the dressing room who may not appreciate being, as I said yesterday, barked at by someone of, similar age. Getting off topic, Ivan Toney. For me, great player, great ability to hold the ball up. Could act as a very good solution when Tottenham playing against those types of teams that, sit back and are very stubborn to break down. Something that we haven't quite figured out this season. A lot of people look for a more creative player to be that kind of door unlocking locksmith. But there's a different way you can do it as well, and that is a more direct fashion, with Ivan Toney being one of the best, if not the best, player with the hold up and the strength aerially in the Premier League. Do you remember that game? I think it was Brentford against Arsenal at Brentford, and I think Saliba broke the record for the amount of aerial duels that he faced against one opponent and didn't win a single one of them, and that was Ivan Toney. I think that was like 13 in one game, which is crazy. So, different option in Ivan Toney, and I like it. I'd be okay with him coming in to Tottenham in an event where Harry Kane left. Harry Kane is not the only name, though, who might not be at Tottenham next season. Richarlison has also been suggested that he might be out of the door. He might be looking for an exit. And there's no shortage of suitors who may be interested in bringing him in. And the two main ones that have been mentioned recently are Juventus and Real Madrid. Now, Real Madrid, big fans of Richarlison. They were very impressed with him in the World Cup. And Carlo Ancelotti is said to be very keen to bring him and to, unite him with his Brazilian compatriot and teammate in Vinicius Jr. in the forward line of Real Madrid next year. But I think a lot of that depends on whether or not Carlo Ancelotti is still a manager. His future is up in the air ever since Julian Nagelsmann's departure was expedited late last week. The merry-go-round of managers that Tottenham are very much involved in does include potentially Real Madrid, as they look towards maybe either bringing in Julian Nagelsmann or Mauricio Pochettino. And they may expedite the removal of Ancelotti to force the hand of Tottenham, or to jump the move on Tottenham, jump the gun and get the guy that they want rather than whoever's left. It's all very interesting. And so whoever the next manager of Real Madrid is next season may or may not want Richarlison as much as Carlo Ancelotti does. It's interesting. And look, Richarlison, for me, it's been very disappointing for Tottenham. He hasn't scored a Premier League goal. I know he's had a disruptive season because of his injuries and because of being played out of position. But, you know, I think he's Tottenham's second highest ever spend on a player. And, you know, it looks likely, depending on what his state of his injury is, that he may go this entire season without scoring a Premier League goal. So I don't think anyone would argue that he hasn't been setting the world on fire at Tottenham. And he himself has said that he's unhappy. You know, he's called out Conte in the press. He had to apologise about that. He's a very emotional guy, but, you know, and a lot of people love the fact that he cares and he's passionate and he has the shithousery aspect. But at the end of the day, is he good enough? Me personally, I've always said no. You can check the tape on that one. Was never a fan of his signing. Didn't think it was value for money. I'm not even a big fan of him just generally as a player. So I wouldn't mind him leaving. But if you do let, you know, two number 9s or two forwards go in a market where number 9s are, you know, very hard to come by, then you have to make sure you're making the right decisions, and you have to have your replacements identified and be almost in advanced talks. Be very confident that before you let one go, that you know you can get one in, otherwise you can get caught out. And the last player that Tottenham have been linked with in that scenario is Rasmus Hojlund. Rasmus Hojlund, the next Erling Haaland, 20-year-old Danish international, ex-Copenhagen and current Atalanta player. Look, I don't know if you watch too much of him or if you've seen too much of him, but the comparisons, I hate the idea of the next anything, especially when you're comparing him to someone that's barely 22 himself. But the comparisons between Hojlund and Haaland do not stop at just having a similar name and coming from a similar area of the world in Scandinavia. They do look physically similar. You know, Google reckons that Hojlund's 6 foot. There's no way he's 6 foot. I reckon he's 6'3". Very tall, very fast, has that ability to break the line and time his runs exceptionally well for someone so young. Look, he's only had one season at the highest level. Copenhagen, I was looking on my Y-Scout tool, doing all the digging into the other areas of his game, and you didn't have to go very far back in the video clips to see him playing on what looked like AstroTurf pitches in front of, you know, 1,000 people that were sort of just standing around the side of the pitch. I don't know if that was like an away game or a pre-season friendly or what, I don't know, but it was certainly wasn't a big stadium. Anyway, very, very talented player, but the downside of the punt for me is the inexperience, the lack of sample size. You know, he literally only signed for Atalanta in the summer. A meteoric rise to fame, become a crowd favourite very, very quickly in Italy, and, you know, has all the bags of talent in the world. I think he scored 7 goals or 8 goals for Atalanta in the league. I think he scored 5 goals in 2 games or 3 games maybe for Denmark this season. Look, certainly doing it on the biggest stage, and he's a real prospect. And Transfer Market reckons he is valued at about 35 million quid. But if he does become available, if Atalanta, you know, can't really hold on to him and have to kind of cash in because of their, you know, their plans, I don't think they're in financial distress. I actually think Atalanta are one of the only 2 teams in Italy that are solvent financially. So I wouldn't think that they're doing too badly financially. But if they were to cash in on him, you'd imagine there'd be a price war. 35 million is the touted number, but I would imagine he'd go for more like 50 because of the potential and the prospect that he is. Lots of Premier League clubs are interested. Tottenham, Arsenal, Manchester United, even Newcastle, Chelsea, everyone's looking for him. And look, first and foremost, when you have that calibre of competition that are looking at someone who have got, you know, I guess more bright lights at the end of the tunnel, more prospects and more recent success, does Rasmus Hojlund choose Tottenham over them? I'm not sure. I'd be very happy if he did, because he's incredibly exciting, and the idea of having him and Ivan Toney in a world where Harry Kane left and you cashed in on Richarlison, I think offers you a multitude of different ways to play. You know, in behind, over the top, tricky, skillfully, allowing players to play off of them all. They're entirely different types of players than what we currently have, and you know, it could be one of the catalysts for kind of resetting at Tottenham, like we keep talking about. There needs to be a plan with the football club. There needs to be that philosophy that's articulated from the top around how they want to see us over the next 5 years or 10 years. What is the goal? How do we achieve it? How do we stick to a footballing philosophy? How do we improve the conversion rates of the youth players into the first team, or even the sell-on rates of them if we move them on to other places to help pay for all of our other plans? And how do we identify better talent, make less mistakes, and how do we figure out ways to cut our losses earlier? All of that stuff is very complex, but something that Tottenham need to figure out, because there's, you know, as I've said a million times, we all say it, there's so many issues at Tottenham, so many slices of pie that need to get pushed around, and one of those areas is the footballing side. And if they were to come out with an identified plan of, you know, promoting youth and young players that are front foot football specialists or you know, entertainers at heart, then, you know, in order to achieve that end, a new manager that comes in with that same philosophy may want, as I said earlier, to kind of clean house. And you know, one of the ways to do that might just be to liquidate the very, very, very precious asset that is Harry Kane before he goes for free. And maybe to acknowledge that Richarlison, for me at least, wasn't, you know, was another mistake, and that we could go in a different direction. As long as those players are available, as long as they want to come to Tottenham, and as long as most of that agreement is already identified before we make any kind of crazy decisions. I'm also okay with any of that not happening, and we just reinvest all of our money and spend all our money this summer on central defenders and a goalkeeper and a creative midfielder, which are far more priorities for me. But, you know, like I say, just reporting what's in the news and giving you my thoughts on it. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, bye-bye.